Well, the NFL draft set records not only for attendance in Detroit, but also for TV viewership. We asked you at home two of the biggest storylines from last week's draft. Yes, everything about the Falcons with Michael Penix Jr. and Kirk Cousins, plus Brock Bowers head into the silver and black. We asked you those questions. We got all those responses. Plus, we're also talking to the founder and CEO of a brand new company called Overnight. You don't want to miss it. SOS starts right now.
Make some noise. This is Sound Off Sports.
Welcome to Sound Off Sports. I'm your host, Mike Davis. Thanks for hanging out with us. We got a lot to break down from the NFL draft from last week. We asked you guys two very big questions at home. We asked you about Brock Bowers falling to the Raiders, going to the silver and black. Plus, we're talking about the biggest talked about topic from last week's draft. Yes, the Atlanta Falcons at number 8 overall, taking Michael Penix Jr., the QB, when they already paid $180 million to Kirk Cousins. We're going to be breaking all that down off the top of the show. I got my partner in crime, James Edward Barrickman, and the fourth with me. James, let's kick this off with everything, all the craziness going down in ATL.
This first response is from Michael Nixon on Facebook. He says, ATL fan here, nope, you don't just draft for right now. You draft for the future as well. Look at the Green Bay model of success with both Rodgers and Love lately. This is the way. This may be one of the best top quarterback drafts in quite some time, and you don't know what you're going to get in future drafts. Take the guy you want now.
Well, I think a lot of people are giving that comparison to Green Bay, right, and how they took Rodgers when they had Favre and how they took Jordan Love when they had Aaron Rodgers. It's a completely different situation. Even Daniel Jeremiah has spoken eloquently about this exact notion. The fact that we're comparing Kirk Cousins and what he's about to do with Atlanta, it's not apples to apples and what, Rodgers already had accomplished when they drafted Jordan Love or what Favre had accomplished in Green Bay. So these are two different scenarios. Kirk Cousins hasn't even arrived yet. He hasn't played one snap with the Falcons yet. So the fact that they're moving on from the guy that they just already paid $180 million to, and they're thinking about the future more so about the now, it doesn't add up in my mind. But what else have people said?
This is from Andy Villagomez on Facebook. He says, from an actual Falcons fan, yes, it makes no sense. It should have been one or the other, not both.
Okay. All right. I think Andy is aligned with my sentiment here. Let's hear another, though, before we really break this down between you and I, James.
Don Ortega on Facebook. After the Matt Ryan departure fiasco, not the wrong decision.
Okay. So, yeah, I think there's always this feeling amongst executives in the NFL. You want to be able to do the best thing for your franchise now while also not mortgaging your future. The problem is when you're 7-10, and you have a decent season, and you're kind of like, we have what it takes to potentially win the NFC South with a quarterback like Kirk Cousins, and you have a top 10 pick, and you have some needs. Maybe you should apply those needs now and start thinking about what you can do to get your team over the hump rather than trying to solve both things at one time. It's even the Kansas City Chiefs, a Super Bowl winning team, everybody has holes on their team. They didn't have a receiver last year, right? They needed to solve their offensive line the year prior. So there's always holes for elite organizations. The Falcons, to feel like they are an elite organization where they don't have any needs and they can just, a wealth of riches of quarterbacks is the way to go. It just doesn't compute in my mind. But tell me what you're thinking, James.
It's interesting because if you're Atlanta, it's like pick one. Are you going to try and win now with Kirk, or are you going to build for the future with Michael Penix? And the whole Green Bay model of success that they're thinking that they're going with, it's totally different situations. Jordan Love was 21 when he was drafted. Michael Penix is 24.
Right.
Kirk Cousins just got there. He's on a 4-year, $180 million deal. Rodgers was halfway through a contract. We kind of all assumed that he was on his way out. Jordan Love, you knew that he needed to sit for a little bit. He was a project where Penix is ready to go right now. So if you're Atlanta, either play to win right now with Kirk Cousins and draft like you're trying to do so, or build for the future with Michael Penix, but it's counterproductive to try and do both. Because with Kirk, right, with a $180 million contract, you're going to be able to compete for the NFC South. You're going to be a playoff team. Right. But with Penix on a rookie deal, if he can play, that makes you a legitimate Super Bowl contender.
Exactly, and that's the name of the game. Everybody, the model for all these teams is to win with quarterbacks on rookie deals. If GM Terry Fontenot is saying he's going to maybe sit for 4 or 5 years, well, now he doesn't get to compete on a rookie deal, and that defeats the entire purpose. You have limited resources. So to even if you get out of this contract in 2 years, $100 million to Kirk Cousins, sure, you do that, but that's stripping away resources you could apply to a team right now. What if they took Rome Odunze and they could help out, and now they have Drake London, Rome Odunze, and Kyle Pitts, and Bijan Robinson. Now this is a great looking offense. The defense wasn't terrible, but it also wasn't elite. They could use an edge rusher. They could use defensive tackle. Even it's suspect what he did in the second round, because Fontenot took a defensive tackle, that Ruke from Clemson, over Johnny Newton, who fell from Illinois. So there's just a lot of weirdness to, I think it's evident that they don't have a plan, right? I think a lot of people are saying if they knew and they identified that Michael Penix was the dude, they should have known months ago that he's going to be there at 8 overall, and you don't pay Kirk Cousins. So it's just a weird situation there in Atlanta. This is going to be a storyline that everybody's going to talk about throughout the entire season. And, man, I feel bad for Kirk Cousins, because if he doesn't get off to a hot start, Michael Penix is going to be lining up and under center very, very quickly. Guys, coming up after a short break, we got more to dive on, everything from the NFL draft, but we're also talking to a really nice young man who's got a really interesting concept when it comes to sports streaming. That's next. All right, welcome back to Sound Off Sports. I am here now with the CEO, the founder of Overnight with no I. No I in this Overnight. It's Kevin McReynolds. Kevin, great to be with you.
Great to be here.
I'm so excited to learn all about Overnight, but let's first talk about your background, because,
Absolutely.
you know, as a defensive tackle, I mean, we could see, it's clear to everybody at home, there's one defensive tackle here in this shot. You were a defensive tackle at UCLA, played a year at UNR, but you're applying a lot of these great qualities that you learn as a student athlete. You're applying it to being an entrepreneur and now getting into the sports streaming space. So tell us, what have you learned from being a student athlete, and how is it helping you create this new great concept Overnight?
Well, one, thanks for having me here. I think a lot of the things that I look at from a student athlete perspective and bringing this down to the business world is pretty clear, right? From one, it's looking at obviously the work ethic of showing up early, right? Being on time, those relationships and understanding those things. But I think outside of that is more so of just understanding that you got to be uncomfortable. You got to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. And I think that's the biggest thing, right? If you're not uncomfortable, you know, when you're facing these bigger tasks, then you'll be fine and you'll just conquer them.
I love what you're doing with this overnight concept. So, you know, let's break this down. You have already got a lot of great sports streaming on this platform.
Absolutely.
If you go right now, you got artistic swimming, you got fencing, gymnastics, rowing, swimming and diving, water polo. You even just did a 5-year agreement with the USA Water Polo Association. So tell us a little bit about what your game plan is. What hole in the market you guys are really filling?
So we're really covering that niche market, right? Those sports that are not the football and basketballs of the world, but everything else, right? They have tons of viewership as well. Their parents and grandparents want to watch that content. There's dedicated followings, and from our standpoint is we're taking those sports and we're putting them on one platform so that everyone has a chance to watch and consume the content that they want.
And what do you see as the future for Overnight? What does the future look for you guys?
Well, the future looks like there's several other sports out there that we want to go into, right? But I think from our standpoint, it's continuously to innovate in ways to open and make the sports more accessible. I think it's one. Two, it's continuing to support those athletes as well. That, you know, they're not, it's not football, it's not basketball right now, but I still believe that those athletes are doing tremendous things, and a lot of them go on to win Olympic medals for the U.S.
You were a 4-star recruit out of high school, coming
Absolutely.
from the D.C. area.
Yep.
You go to UCLA, defensive tackle, especially in today's NFL, a guy like you in that 3 technique,
Yep.
who's a little undersized, who can go up against, you know, defensive tackles, guards, tackles, all that kind of stuff. You would have a lot of promise potentially at the next level, but you have a great relationship with the great legendary head coach Ron Rivera and his
Yep.
wife, and he told you something in a private conversation. I think that would be a great thing for you to share with our audience, because
Yep.
it really speaks to the type of person you are, but how, you know, you're going to translate that success and that honesty that you had in your playing career to now the business world?
Well, I think when I was done towards the end of my career at UCLA and even Nevada, when I was done, there was a conversation that I had with him where he sat me down and I kind of asked a couple questions. I was like, hey, what do you think my chances are of playing in the NFL? And, being the person that he is, one, I respect him for having the conversation. He's an incredible human being. But what Coach Rivera told me was, hey, Kev, at most you're going to go play in the league for a couple of years and then you won't make it to pension. But I think, you're one of those guys that are going to be far more successful off the field. And he was 100% correct, right? I think that by the tools that I have and from football and from sports in general, I think what we've been able to create here at Overnight and from what I've been able to do already at this point. I mean, I was able to sell a company in my last startup. We sold that in 2021. It was the largest meme company in the world. And I ran business development there, and we were able to be really successful. And then that led me into doing some consulting and then eventually leading into Overnight. So Coach was completely correct in that and saying that, hey, if you do the right things now and you continue to build off the field and learn and take those tools, you're going to be successful later on in life, and he was absolutely correct.
All right, Kevin McReynolds,
thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
We appreciate you being with us, guys. You can stick around after the short break. There's going to be more SOS with Mike Davis, and there's 2 eyes in Mike Davis, no eyes in Overnight. We'll see you in a short second. Welcome back to Sound Off Sports. Well, the silver and black definitely made a lot of noise, especially in GM Tom Telesco's first draft with the Las Vegas Raiders. At 13, he selected Brock Bowers, a spot where people thought, oh, maybe the silver-black need to go offensive line, they have to go quarterback, they have to go cornerback, all these different areas of need, but they took maybe one of the best players available at that given spot. James, we asked the people at home what they thought about the silver and black, the Raiders taking Brock Bowers, the tight end from Georgia, at 13th overall. What did one person at home have to say? They called in via voicemail, right?
Yes, this is probably going to go into the Sound Off Sports Response Hall of Fame. Take a listen.
The Raiders at 13, what a phenomenal pick. This kid, Brock Bowers, was the top tight end in the draft. He was the #1 tight end and receiver combo coming out of Georgia. These players coming out these days aren't generational like Brock Bowers. Get out of the way, give him the damn football, and watch him score. Every Raider hater is going to understand how instrumental this kid is and how much value he's going to bring the Raiders. Get the hell out of the way. Watch him score. Watch him excel. He's a generational 13 to 14-year NFL starter. Boom! How do you like them apples?
Boom! How do you like those apples? Listen, I wish we know the name of this man because what a legendary call. You're right, James. I'm psyched up. I'm even more psyched up than I was.
I feel good.
After listening to this. Listen, I agree with this dude. It's true. Brock Bowers, let's talk about what this 21-year-old did during his 3 years with Georgia. He was an undersized 4-star recruit going into Georgia. Okay, he led Georgia in catches, reception yards, and TD receptions all 3 years he was there. Won 2 back-to-back national championships, and now he's 3rd all-time in Georgia for receptions and 5th all-time in reception yards. If you've watched any of this guy's tape, any Georgia Bulldog games, this guy is all about yak, yards after the catch. Once the ball gets into Brock Bowers' hands, he's like a monster with the ball in his hands, explosive. He makes things happen. He's a playmaker. And to me, I think why Raiders fans are going to love this pick is he's a lot like the same intensity that he brings to the game. It's kind of like Max Crosby, what he does on the defensive side. He's a very similar player in terms of intensity and just energy and how he's going to garner excitement from the fans. So I love the pick, and I think it's a hard thing always to think need over best available, but sometimes you can't psych yourself out. You can't reach for need every single time. So I think Tom Telesco did a great job drafting a guy who, I mean, some people, Bleacher Report had him as the #2 overall ranked prospect. So it's pretty good snag at 13.
100%. And I think anytime you can get the best available prospect, you made the right choice. They obviously wanted a quarterback. They wanted Michael Penix. They wanted Jaden Daniels. They couldn't get either of them. They didn't reach for a quarterback who's not going to work. That's okay. Go with one of the best prospects in the draft. People are calling Brock Bowers the greatest tight end prospect ever. So build the rest of your roster. It's much better to stick with a bridge quarterback like Minshew or Aiden O'Connell than reach for a quarterback early in the rounds, miss on somebody who's not going to work out. So I liked it.
And I think, like our caller said, he's going to be a staple tight end for years to come. So anytime you can get a guy that talented, think like this guy's really has the ability from an offensive perspective to be like a Kelsey-esque, Kittle-esque type of dynamic playmaker for this offense. So I think it's a great snag at 13. Let's hear what other people had to say.
This is from Brandon Biden on Facebook. He says, Raiders were lucky Bowers was even still available. He's the McCaffrey of tight ends. Just get the ball to Bowers and amazing things happen.
I like that comparison, to a McCaffrey-esque kind of guy once the ball's in his hands because he's a playmaker. He makes things happen. He's good in the slot. He even makes tough catches. So I think he's going to be a nice fixture in this offense. And a lot of people are saying, well, you took Michael Mayer from Notre Dame, the tight end last year in the second round. That's a high-level selection for another tight end. But maybe they can do a lot of these two tight end, sets. And especially Mayer's a bigger guy. He'll probably be more fixated on the blocking element and stuff. And then, you can really use Bowers as a catch-first kind of tight end.
This pick felt very Antonio Pierce-esque. He really fits the mold of what the Raiders want to be, which is big, physical, tougher than you, run the football. And then they followed that up with Jackson Powers-Johnson, who was probably the best center prospect in the draft. So Raiders really going with the Antonio Pierce ideology here.
Yeah,
and I think both these picks fit that
definitely.
very well.
Gritty guys, gritty selections, and that's going to translate to the field. Okay, we got one more person at home. Let's hear what they had to say.
Jay Alarcon on Facebook, quote, who's going to throw to him or even to Adams?
Well, yeah, that is a concern. And a lot of people were saying, listen, the Raiders need to address the quarterback spot regardless in this draft, whether it's the first round, second round, whatever it is. They didn't do that at all. And I actually think it's a testament to being calm, cool, collected, and poised. If Tom Telesco doesn't feel like there's a quarterback to take, there's not a quarterback to take. I actually think the Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell situation isn't as bad as people think. But let's ponder on this for a second. Now, when you really do identify that quarterback who can take you to the promised land, now you got Brock Bowers.
100%.
Especially for rookie quarterbacks, a tight end is a quarterback's best friend. So next year, who knows? Sanders might be there. Who knows who you can select next year? There's going to be a wealth of decent quarterbacks next year. Maybe not like this year, but there's still going to be quite a few out there. So maybe you grab a guy next year, and now you got Brock Bowers in the fold, and you got a quarterback's best friend. So you can't force the situation. I think Telesco had an incredible draft for his first as Silver and Black's GM. James, any last words on this?
No, there's going to be plenty more opportunities for quarterbacks, right? So don't reach on one that's not going to work. Build the rest of your roster so when you do finally fall in love with one that you're able to acquire, you can go get them and set them up in the best possible situation that you can. So I love what they did.
See, Terry Fontenot, you could have even taken Brock Bowers and had him and Kyle Pitts. You could have had Rome and Dunze. You could have done all this stuff for the now. So I think the Raiders did something where they took best available, and they're also thinking of the future all in one selection. It's a great thing. Guys, coming up after a short break, we're going to be diving into sink or swim. I'm going to tell you who had some of the best drafts in the NFL, who had some of the worst drafts in the NFL. And yes, you guessed it, the Falcons are one of them. We got more of this coming up in a short sec. All right, welcome back. Now it's time for Sink or Swim. I'm going to tell you who had some of the best drafts, who had some of the worst drafts. And yes, we already spoke about some of the bad. So let's continue with that. Atlanta Falcons. Listen, I don't want to talk about this the entire show. You have to choose a lane. You can't try to go for the Super Bowl and also think of the future when you have a lot of holes on your team. Every team has holes. When you have a top 10 pick, there's too many good players available to help you in the now. You should have known that you want Michael Penix, and if you think he's the next Patrick Mahomes, well, then you don't give $180 million to Kirk Cousins in the now. You just don't. It's bad for internally for the team. It's bad for players on the team. It's bad for just having a game plan, and they don't have one, so I didn't like that. Denver, Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos. Listen, from a system perspective, everybody keeps saying how Bo Nix is going to be great in his system. That might be true. He had a lot of starts under his belt with Oregon. I just don't think you needed to draft him at 12. I think you could have moved back, especially if you don't have a second-round pick. You know, they had to give up a first last year, a second and a third this year just to get Sean Payton, their head coach, from the Saints. So you might as well move back and try to get another second-round pick. We'll see what happens there. I don't think Bo Nix is a first-round player, but they felt so, and that's what they did. We'll see if Sean Payton is right. And lastly, Buffalo Bills. This is my perhaps most egregious thing. I think this is even worse than the Falcons. They traded with their arch nemesis, who they're continually facing in the playoffs. The Buffalo Bills trade with the Chiefs, and they trade back, and they allow the Chiefs to draft Xavier Worthy, the guy who had the fastest 40 time of all time in the combine. And now the rich get richer, and Buffalo is basically shooting themselves in the foot. Doesn't make any sense, even though they got Keon Coleman. Let's talk about the good, though, before we let you go. I got to say, Chicago, everything that's being cooked up there with GM Ryan Poles, I love it. Caleb Williams, then at 9, you also get Rome Odunze. It's perfect. You got DJ Moore, you got Keenan Allen, now you got Rome Odunze. Pittsburgh Steelers keep building that line. Troy Fontano fell to them. They also got Zach Frazier, so they're beefing up there, plus Roman Wilson and Peyton Wilson, a great linebacker out of NC State, and everybody knows Roman Wilson with Michigan. Steelers know their wideouts. I love that pick and everything they're building there. And lastly, I hate to be a homer, but listen, I love drafts when you take best available and you can also couple that with need, and that's what the Philadelphia Eagles did. They got Quinyon Mitchell, the best defensive back in the draft. Then they also got another first-round graded guy in the second round at 40th overall in Cooper DeJean. So Howie Roseman, it's Howie's season during the draft, and you kept it up. That's what I feel about this year's draft. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week on Sound Off Sports.